Hello one and all, and welcome to True Fan Forum. In this video, I want to talk a bit about one of my absolute favorite comic books of all times, ROM by Marvel Comics. I love this comic book, folks. Now, interestingly, ROM began existence not as a comic book, but as a toy. The ROM action figure, if you will, was created in the late 1970s by Parker Brothers and was an early electronic toy, meaning it had, flashing lights and I believe some sound effects. Now, unfortunately, while Parker Brothers are very good at creating board games and other toys, yeah, not so good. And this kind of shows in the ROM toy. The ROM toy was basically made on the cheap, and wasn't really well made at all. It had very few points of articulation, so it couldn't move that well. Its packaging was seen as dull. The marketing was uninspired, and it basically ended up as a failure, selling only about, I believe, 200,000 to 300,000 units, which apparently is nothing in the toy business. So yeah, it got canceled. But thankfully, before ROM could take a one-way ticket to the island of misfit toys, Parker Brothers created a licensing deal with Marvel to create one of, like I said before, one of my absolute favorite comic books of all time. Now, in the comic book, ROM was a humanoid alien from the planet of Galador, which was a world of beauty and peace and prosperity until the coming of the vicious dire wraiths, a evil species of shapeshifters who use both advanced technology and black magic. Now, the dire wraith fleet devastated several of Galador's colony worlds on their way to Galador itself. In response to this threat, Galadorian scientists created a process by which a Galadorian could be transformed into a superpowered cyborg warrior called a Space Knight. Now, of all of the many people who answered the call to volunteer to become a Space Knight, Rom was the first, and he quickly earned the distinction of being known as the greatest of the Space Knights. Now, before I go into the story, let me stop and explain a little bit about what the Space Knights are and what they can do. Now, as I said, all Space Knights are cyborgs, which means that part of their Galadorian's organic body was grafted onto a superpowered exoskeleton, which was called armors. Now, all Space Knight armors are made out of a metal alloy from Galador called, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, plandinium. Now, plandinium, as I said before, is extremely durable, which means that while it's not impossible to injure or kill a Space Knight, it's extremely difficult. Now, all Space Knights have superhuman strength, various life support mechanisms to protect and maintain the organic parts of their bodies, which allows Space Knight to survive in a variety of environments, from, say, extremely high and low temperatures, deep underwater, and even in outer space for apparently an indefinite amount of time. Now, all Space Knights also have rocket pods, which allow them to fly, either in the atmosphere or in space. Now, in addition to all of that, each Space Knight was given a power or weapon unique to that particular Space Knight. So, for example, one Space Knight can turn invisible, while another can create force fields or shoot fire from his hands, or another might have a javelin made out of the same substance as his armor. Now, Rom had three pieces of equipment, which were actually based on the accessories that came with the toys. Now, the first piece of equipment was his Universal Translator, which does exactly what it sounds like. It's a device that analyzes and translates any language ROM comes in contact with, so he can communicate with pretty much anyone in apparently seconds, which is handy. Now, his second piece of equipment was his Energy Analyzer, which again does what it sounds like. It analyzes energy patterns. Now, this is also ROM's primary way of discovering disguised dire wraiths, who, as I said before, are shapeshifters, so they can look like anybody they want to. Now, when the energy analyzer's beam lands on a dire wraith, it interacts with their own particular energy fields and I believe some elements in their bodies, which then, I guess, feeds an image back to ROM's cybernetic senses or some kind of signal to his senses that allows ROM to see the dire wraiths as they really are, despite whatever their disguise happens to be. Now, in addition to that, like I said, the analyzer can analyze, the energy patterns and potential of other beings and, equipment, and it can follow energy trails. Now, Rom's third piece of equipment and his weapon is the neutralizer, which is basically said to be the most powerful weapon ever known on Galador. Now, this neutralizer can neutralize energy, apparently any sort of energy, and it can be set for a variety of settings. So, on a low setting, it can actually cure someone of radiation poisoning. Another setting might allow it to disrupt or disable machines by neutralizing their power source. And on higher settings, the neutralizer can actually kill a being by simply neutralizing their life energy. But thankfully, Rom, being the valiant sword he is, has a real problem with killing unless it is absolutely positively necessary. Now, interestingly enough, the neutralizer, when trained on dire wraiths, for the most part, does not kill them. No, what happens was when a neutralizer beam hits a dire wraith, it neutralizes the energy around a dire wraith, which causes a transdimensional portal to open that leads to a place called Limbo. Now, the affected dire wraith is then sucked through the portal into Limbo, where they are banished for all eternity. Now, Limbo has been shown in the comic books, and believe me when I tell you, folks, it is not Club Med or any sort of vacation spot. It's pretty bad. So dire wraiths have not only learned to fear Rom's neutralizer, they would actually prefer to die rather than be banished. But again, Rom generally doesn't kill, so most dire wraiths are out of luck. Again, so that's just quick rundown of the Space Knights and what they can do. Now, back to the story. As I said, Rom was the first person to undergo the process and was quickly called the greatest of the Space Knights for his valiant actions fighting the Wraiths. Now, he and the other Space Knights were able to repel the dire Wraith invasion, scattering them across the universe, and actually even following them to the dire Wraith homeworld called, well, Wraith World. Now, knowing that the dire Wraiths were scattered, the other Space Knights decided to follow the dire Wraiths to wherever they might be. Now, they decided to do this for a couple reasons. One reason is sort of their conscience, because they know that if the dire Wraith goes to another planet, they'll only attack that planet and try to take it over. So they cannot in good conscience allow the dire Wraiths to harm other innocent beings, just because the Space Knights happen to drive them away. Now, the second reason they followed the dire Wraiths was the fear that, left to their own devices, the dire Wraiths would just simply, again, conquer other planets, regain their strength, and attack Galador once more, and perhaps the next time actually succeed in destroying their homeworld. So the Space Knights, including Rom, traveled throughout the universe. So Rom fought the dire Wraiths for 200 years, wherever they happened to be, until he came to a small blue-green planet we know affectionately as Earth. And it is here that most of the comic book series takes place. Now, as I said before, Rom landed on Earth, specifically outside of a small town in West Virginia called Clairton, where he met and quickly befriended a young woman named Brandy Clark. Now, I mentioned the town of Clairton and Brandy Clark because they become extremely important to Rom and the series. I mean, Clairton basically becomes Rom's sort of home, or certainly home base while he's on Earth. And Brandy Clark, again, is probably one of the most important people in the comic books, because not only is she the first human to encounter Rom, she quickly becomes one of his greatest friends, allies, and later on, even a love interest. So as I said, most of the comic book involves Rom's adventures on Earth, fighting the dire Wraiths, who he discovered are not only are they on Earth and have been on Earth for some time, but they've wormed their way into several levels of society, governments, law enforcement, military, even the private sector, and as Rom arrived, are hatching all these plots and sinister deeds to conquer Earth and use it as a staging pad to, again, once more invade and try to destroy Galador. Now, interestingly, excuse me, Rom initially has troubles with his encountering the dire wraiths. Mostly because he has a lot of trouble dealing with Earth humans. Because most people, when they see Rom, they kind of freak out because they don't see a valiant cyborg warrior. They see this weird looking robot. And whenever Rom does attack dire wraiths, since they look like humans, all innocent bystanders happen to see is, again, a weird looking robot killing innocent people. Not knowing that Rom is not in fact killing them, and they're not humans, they're dire wraiths. So that causes a lot of problems for Rom because his actions, misunderstood as they are by a good chunk of the human populace, are seen as aggressive. So he ends up with run-ins with, the police, government, the military, and various superhumans. Now, it's these cameos, these guest appearances, that really solidify Rom's place in the Marvel Universe. Because in this comic book, you will see guest appearances by the X-Men, Doctor Strange, the Avengers, the Submariner, and a lot of other people. So again, it really establishes that this is the Marvel Earth. Now, mostly when Rom encounters, say, a superhero, they think he's up to no good, he's actually a threat. So they end up fighting him only to later on discover that he's actually the good guy, and the people they're thinking they're protecting are actually the threat. So again, early on in the series, Rom has a lot of conflicts and there's a lot of misunderstandings about what Rom is and what he's doing on Earth. But eventually, the dire wraith menace is fully exposed, and the world, its governments, its militaries, and its superheroes end up helping Rom to, once and for all, defeat the dire wraith invasion. Freeing Earth forever from their menace. Now, interestingly, this is not the end of the ROM series. It does go on a little bit afterwards. Now, I'm not going to tell you what happens at the very end of the series. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I really recommend, if you can, get the comic books. You'll like the ending, believe me. Now, let me see. Okay, so that's the story. Oh, now let me give you a brief explanation of what I love about Rom, and which I do, because Rom is such a wonderful character. I mean, in one hand, he's valiant and brave and noble and just utterly dedicated to preserving life and defending the good and the weak against the evil dire wraiths. But on the other hand, and what I think really makes Rom interesting is there's a certain sadness about him, even a depression about him. Well, first off, I think it comes from the fact that he's just tired of fighting. I mean, again, he's been at war for 200 years. So who knows what kind of evil plots he's foiled, or God only knows what he's seen the dire wraiths do. Because again, these are evil beings. They will do all manner of heinous acts to complete their goals. So again, I don't even want to think of what horrors Rom has seen in 200 years. So yeah, he's tired. He wants to stop fighting, and in fact, he kind of feels like the war will never end, that the dire wraiths will never be vanquished. Now, the second thing I think that adds to Rom's depression and his morose aspect of his personality is the fact that he laments the loss of his humanity. He has come to feel that he is not a human. He's just this war machine. That's all he'll ever be. Even though that's not necessarily true, because one interesting aspect of the Space Knight process is that it is reversible. Yes, apparently, a Space Knight can be converted back to their full human bodies. In fact, the parts of their bodies that were not grafted onto the Space Knight armor were preserved and stored, with the idea that once the dire wraiths were completely vanquished, the Space Knights could return to their full human lives as a reward for their valiant service. But again, is not on Galador, he's on Earth. And so his homeworld is very, very far away. He has no idea if he'll ever even get there. So yes, he does lament his loss of humanity. And it's just really, he just feels like he is just a machine whose only purpose is to fight. And I love that aspect. I love that aspect of Rom because it makes him a much more complex character, much more interesting character than he was just this upright, outstanding, never say die kind of guy, which it's okay, but it can get a little dull, a little one-dimensional. So again, I love that complex aspect to his personality. And in fact, Rom's depression can often be used as a weapon against him because the dire wraiths will use his depression, will use his sort of grief to attack him and to sort of bring him down. But no matter how despondent Rom might get, no matter how low he sinks, he always manages to rise up, to remember his purpose and his heart and his beliefs in protecting good. So Rom always triumphs. So again, I love that. I love that roller coaster ride of up and down, and really seeing him struggle, and yet always stick to his ideals and what he values most. So I love that aspect. Now another aspect that's really interesting that kind of feels into Rom's sort of depression over his current state is, I said, his relationship with Brandy Clark, who, as I said before, was his ally and a love interest in the comic book. Now, even though Brandy loves Rom and Rom loves Brandy, he feels that he can't love her and that he should sort of rebuff her feelings for him because, again, he's not fully human. He feels that he can't love her like she deserves, like a man could love a woman. So again, that's another aspect of his character that often leads to another conflict because he just wants to deny his feelings so much. Again, and interestingly enough, not just because he's for himself, but to protect Brandy, to give her the life he feels she deserves with a full-blooded, fully human man who can love her in return the way organic beings can. So again, I love that because it makes Rom a very complex, very relatable character. And what's interesting is that whenever Rom gets in this idea of what it means to be human, which is a wonderful philosophical element, but interestingly, while Rom might lament the fact that he's not, in terms of his body, fully human, I feel that the complexity of his character, his ability to love and to grieve and to feel all these complex emotions, make him very human and shows that you don't have to be, completely organic to be human. That perhaps humanity is not just what our bodies are, but relies in our souls. So again, love that about Rom, love that aspect, makes reading the comic books a thrill. What else? Again, I love Rom because he's such a wonderful, complex character. And again, this goes, I think, to Bill Matlow's brilliant writing. I mean, if you haven't read Bill Matlow before, I suggest you look him up, look at what he's written because, he's fantastic. He's got this wonderful sort of wonderful lyrical, almost poetic style to his writing, and there's a certain archaic way he frames his writing and his character's speech patterns. I mean, like, by archaic, I don't mean they sound like they did, like they're from the Middle Ages, whatever. They sound like Thor with thee or verily or nay. That's not like, but just the speech pattern is a bit older than what we used to, which actually with Rom, and since he's supposed to be a space knight, really helps. And I just love reading Rom and see his wonderful dialogue. And another thing interesting to know about Bill Matlow, for all of you Guardians of the Galaxy fans out there, and let's face it, after the movies, who isn't? Bill Matlow is the co-creator of Rocket Raccoon. So if you don't love him for his writing, love him for creating that wonderful, gun-happy rodent. Just thought I'd throw it out there. I also love the artwork in the comic book by either Sal Buscema, who I think he did a wonderful job in his title, but Steve Ditko as well. Their styles are a bit different. I think I might have a bit more of attachment to Sal Buscema because his work just seemed to be a little more detailed in his run. But again, both are very talented artists. Both are just fantastic. In fact, let me see if I can dig through one of my old issues to... here's a great page to show you what I'm talking about in terms of artwork. Look at that. Look at that. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, look at the dynamic poses, great action, just absolutely wonderful artwork. And again, I could probably dig through my quite considerable stack of comics and show you more examples, but that would make this video even longer than it already is. So again, I love this work. Now, interestingly enough, after the ROM series ended, things kind of changed. ROM kind of was put on the back burner after a while, and eventually Marvel lost the rights to do ROM. So he pretty much got sort of retconned out of Marvel's existence, sort of. I mean, because interestingly enough, while Marvel could no longer publish, could use a ROM, they could use other elements that were unique to the comic book that weren't really connected to the toy line. So, for example, they could still keep the idea of the Space Knights and Galador and even the Dire Wraiths. So those elements remain even till the present day, until I think very recently. In fact, I think it was the Marvel comic Royals, you actually see the Dire Wraiths as they were presented in the original ROM comic book. So even though they couldn't use ROM, they could still use other elements, which is pretty cool. But thankfully, ROM did not fade away into obscurity completely. You see, in 2016, comic book publishers IDW created a licensing deal with Hasbro, which is the parent company of Parker Brothers, to create a brand new ROM comic book. Let me see where did I put that. Here's a little taste of it. See, IDW. Now this comic book is interesting because it kind of follows the pattern of the original ROM comic book. He's still this cyborg warrior. I think still called a Space Knight. He fights the Dire Wraiths on Earth, and that's basically the same idea. Although they did do a few changes. The Dire Wraiths look different than they did in the original comic book, even though they're still shapeshifters. Plus, the Dire Wraiths in the IDW series are solely magical, and in fact seem to look at technology as an abomination. And there are a few more changes to the comic book, to allow him to use the, so a few more changes. Nothing really major. I mean, it's still in his heart and soul ROM. And one idea that was interesting was how they decided to do the character of ROM, because they didn't decide to say, okay, we're just gonna create this character. We're just gonna completely revamp his look and make him look nothing like the original. No. They didn't do that. For one thing, I think because the people creating the ROM comic book are fans of the original, so they love his look. So instead of starting from scratch, what they did was they sort of modified his look, updated a little bit, just give it its own twist to help make this, while it's still ROM, give it their own flavor, its own IDW flavor. For example, so this is basically ROM in the original. Here's a good picture. So that's original ROM from the Marvel Comics series. Now here's what ROM looked like in this new series. Again, you can see some differences. Overall look is pretty much the same sort of head, the sort of lights on the chest. Same basic look with, again, a few minor changes. For example, they gave him fingers, where originally ROM's hands were sort of like these mitts, basically like mittens or mitts, which again made it look like exactly like the toy. So again, I love that idea of taking the classic look, updating, and just tweaking it a little bit to make it a bit more new and to really add their own style to it. Because that works on two ways. For long-term fans like me, we see like, oh my gosh, that's ROM! Yes, instant recognition. And for new fans, it gives them something new to look at, something interesting. So again, I actually like ROM's look in this comic book. I'm not so much of a diehard purist that I go, no, this is ROM, that's not ROM. No, I like it. I like what they did. I like the sort of blending of the old and the new. It's a good look. As I said, I like what IDW did with it. It's a good comic book. It's entertaining. I kind of have do I like it as much as I like the original? Maybe not, because I have a soft spot for the original comic book. Because as I said before, it's fantastic. It's a brilliant comic book. But again, the IDW series is pretty good. I like it. It's got a nice feel to it. It tries to make itself its own comic book. So I agree with that. I like it. Oh, interestingly enough, the universe of ROM takes place in is a universe that he shares with other Hasbro properties, namely the Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Mask, among others. So ROM has interacted with, fought beside, and fought against, the Transformers, G.I. Joe, and all that, which I just love that idea of seeing all these great, toy lines mashed together. It's reading a comic book where all these characters are, sort of mixed together reminds me of being a kid, scattering my toys on the floor and just, mixing and matching it, like having a G.I. Joe fight my He-Man and all that stuff. So that's just fun to read. It's just crazy fun and oh, the nostalgia factor. Lovely, lovely nostalgia. Now, the IDW series ran for, I believe, 13 issues or more, and one annual before it was canceled. But luckily, as soon as the ROM comic book ended, IDW created a new series called ROM and the Micronauts, which teamed ROM up with, well, the Micronauts, hence the title. Now, quickly, the Micronauts are another toy line turned into another Marvel comic book from the early 80s, also written by Bill Mantlo. So that's just awesome. So again, so this comic book was immediately a draw, knowing who the Micronauts are, because again, I'm a fan of them as well. Knowing who Rom is, just knowing their history and the fact their original comics were both written by Bill Mantlo, is just it's so much fun to read. Now, after the making of this video, there are three issues of ROM and the Micronauts. So if you happen to be at a local comic book store and you see them, pick them up, read them. They're interesting. They're fun. You might have to pick up some back issues of both the Micronauts original series, also created by IDW. Well, not the original series, the series created by IDW, and the series created by IDW for ROM, just to help you get a bit of their particular backstories. So again, read them. Yeah, I guess that's it, folks. Again, I love the ROM comic book. It's one of my absolute favorite comic books. The artwork is fantastic. The the writing is stellar. It's engaging, and ROM is just this wonderful, complex character that just draws me in. So if you want to, and you happen to see it, please pick up any back issue of the old ROM comic book by Marvel Comics. You won't be disappointed. It's fantastic. I love that series so much. Well, again, folks, that's all I've got to say. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.